Today we are going to be talking about the Kyle Rittenhouse Always Ready bundle available at armoredrepublic.com. It's a very practical kit, including everything that you need all the way from hydration to first aid to general purpose to magazine holders and to a very comfortable plate carrier. So included is the Testudo Gen 3 plate carrier, and we also have 2 C3 plates that I've included in the bundle. So these plates are multi-curve, multi-hit ceramic, so they can take multiple rounds. I really like these plates because it's going to offer level 4 protection. Thank you guys for watching. Again, you can go to armoredrepublic.com, linked below, and you can purchase your Kyle Rittenhouse Always Ready bundle today.
What Christians often don't understand in the culture wars and in the fight for life is that abortion is not just one issue among many. Abortion is almost the linchpin upon which the liberal establishment swings. But what happens when you pull out a linchpin? The door falls off.
It takes a long time to go from a few intellectuals believing some bad ideas to bringing those ideas into the culture more and more and more until they bear fruit. The answer how we got here is because of the silence and inaction of the church.
Somebody might say, well, you know, Margaret Sanger, she didn't quite know exactly what she was doing. Well, first of all, you're speaking from ignorance because she wrote about herself and she wrote what her plans were, so much so that she, impressed Adolf Hitler. How do you impress Hitler?
My father walks up to me wearing a BLM shirt and he says to me, why are you out here fighting a white man's issue? But he was a walking poster child for all things CRT, because in critical race theory, you see racism in all things and at all times. Even when a 6'4", 260-pound black man is trying to save a baby.
We're going to expose and discover who the real Margaret Sanger was and how her attack and assault against the family in America explains our current culture of death and upside-down world that we're living in today. This is where it all started. It was here that Sanger opened up her first unlicensed, illegal birth control clinic in 1916.
Study the past, not just to understand what happened then, but to understand what's happening now.
This is a Leviathan. How it's a fitting place to remember what happens when bad ideas are taken to their logical conclusion.
We bless the holy name of Jesus and we shout, let the baby live. Let the baby live. Let the baby live.
Stop waiting for someone else to grow a righteous culture of life for you and on your family's behalf. It will not happen. If not you, who? If not now, when?
Hey y'all, thank you for joining us live on Business Makers. It's good to be with you this Friday morning. We do a Business Makers pre-conference at our Fight Laugh Feast conference, which is happening in October. So make sure you sign up for that. We have Kevin Freeman from the Economic War Room on Blaze TV speaking. We have Darren Doan from Doan Agency speaking. And we have Isaac Botkin from T-Rex speaking. Really excited about having these guys to Business Makers. Business Makers is just kind of a 4-hour pre-conference, and pretty much everyone that attends is some sort of business entrepreneur, investor. So it's a great time of networking and fellowshipping around. And then we wrap up with Cross Politic doing a roundtable with the speakers. So Knox and Toby and me will finish out the Business Makers pre-conference with a roundtable. It's a lot of fun. Really encourage you guys, go to prodigalamerica.com to sign up and sign up for the whole conference, not just Business Makers pre-conference. So thank you for doing that. I would like to introduce you to Richard Giles. Richard Giles is a legacy in the kind of aircraft management consulting world. He's been with, he retired from kind of recently Northwest Aircraft Management LLC, which was kind of his own consulting LLC, but he's going to fill me in on that. Giles Aerobatic Aircraft, Executive Flight Crews, Acrotech Aviation, Dimensional Fabricators, Business Financial Management Consulting, Western Skyways, Columbia Professional Systems LLC, Great Northwest Airplane Company, and so that's I'm sure he's even got more than that in his back pocket. So Richard, thank you for coming on the show, and I need Bree to let Richard in. Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you for coming on Business Makers.
Hey, it's my pleasure. It's an honor.
So maybe just give me a little sketch, actually, of your history in the business world. It sounds like you got a lot going on, and would love to kind of just start there.
Yeah, I think that all the things that you just listed off are just an indication that I've always wanted to have something going on. And so even when I was employed by other people as a pilot or doing other things, I always had something else going on. I had a side business going, and some of those grew to be pretty substantial organizations and very very profitable businesses. And some of them were just a side gig. But started out when I actually during college years, and some of them had short lives, and some of them are continuing on, like the Giles Aerobatic Aircraft. That's been going for almost 35 years.
Okay. And so I guess this, obviously your journey starts with what'd you major in college? How, and then what was your first job out of college?
I started off as a pre-med major. Everybody in my family were in the medical profession. My roommate was my older brother, who went on to go to med school. Okay. So I started out there, but it just did not fit me. So I switched over to business major. Business, took a lot of accounting, and then I've always loved math and to the technical side of things. So I had a minor in math.
Okay.
First job right out of college. I was working part-time for a company, a fairly large food company in the Chattanooga, Tennessee area. While I was in college, and they offered me kind of two options. One was what they considered to be sort of an executive track, management track, or to go out and fly the airplane. And I took the airplanes.
Interesting.
21 years old, there was not much choice.
Yeah. You wanted to fly. You wanted to go fast.
Yeah.
Now, so you spent, something like 40 years in the aerospace industry, basically, then?
Yeah, actually, 40 years has been my sort of primary employment or entrepreneurial focus.
Yeah.
But actually been flying for almost 60 years now.
Oh, wow. Wow, very good. Mostly for the commercial airline industry, or where at?
No, I kind of got into the corporate or the private jet side of the industry when I was coming out of college. It was right at the tail end of the Vietnam War, and there were tons of pilots everywhere. The economy was in a bit of a constriction right then, and airline pilots were all being furloughed everywhere. And so I had this good, solid job offered to me, and I went that route. And I also had seen the devastation that airline careers can have. Doesn't have to. I know many good, faithful men who are airline pilots, but it can have a devastating effect on your family. So I chose that side of the business and never been sorry for it.
Yeah. So basically, you would you would fly people around privately.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so did you have your own plane, or you worked for a company that had plane that people would pay to charter stuff? What was that model?
I've always in that side of my profession, I've always managed other people's airplanes. The first job there, they owned at that time 3 aircraft, substantial corporate aircraft, and I was hired in kind of at the bottom of the totem pole. We had, I think, about 4 or 5 people in the flight department at that time, And I
Okay.
stayed with them for 15 years, and wound up leaving as as their flight department manager, managing a total of 9 people and 4 airplanes. So
Yeah.
yeah, they buy the airplanes, and I take care of them and manage them as well as fly them.
Okay. So just curious, if I need to fly my family on Monday to I don't know, Hawaii, and fly my family on Friday back, and I want to do a private chartered experience with you guys, what would that cost?
You're saying Hawaii?
Sure. I'm in Idaho, and I want to go to Hawaii.
Oh, you're talking about 150,000.
Oh my gosh. How does that? So, I mean, you're talking about significantly rich businesses and people that can work with you guys and charter.
Well, there's a common misconception that we have to justify the use of an airplane in a corporation or by an individual by its economic cost savings or things like that. And one of the things that I learned literally before I started with this company was that you can never justify a company airplane if you're just looking at the accounting side of the business, because it will never pencil out. But where it does work, and this was the model that first company I worked for drilled into me, is that you can do things that you absolutely could not do any other way.
Yeah.
So if you think of it like, well, it would be cheaper for you to in the morning, if you needed to go over to Pullman, it'd be cheaper for you to walk over there.
Yeah.
But that doesn't make any sense. And you can do things with your car that you can't do if you have to walk everywhere. So it's kind of the same thing. But if you just look at it from a cost standpoint, it'll never pencil. But we would be able to get people to meetings, to look at opportunities, to visit job sites, things like that, and get them home. And the net benefit to the company would be in the millions of dollars. So if you're talking about $150,000 to get a group of people somewhere, and the net benefit is $40 million, then it starts to make sense.
So if so I'm in Moscow, Idaho,
right,
and we have Schweitzer Engineering. If you know Schweitzer, they have a couple of their own jets and planes.
Mm-hmm.
Why would a company not want to have their own jets and airplanes versus contracting with a private organization like what your company was?
Well, just a slight correction. We don't own any airplanes. We don't offer an airplane along with crews. That would be a charter company. But a company like Schweitzer, where they own their own airplanes, it gives them just that much more flexibility. Mm-hmm. They don't have to call and schedule the airplane. They own the airplane. They know it's going to be available. They also know the crews, and there's not another level of profit built in there that the charter company has to make money. And so with the corporation owning their own airplanes, they control their own destiny. It's like owning your own trucks versus using a courier service.
Yeah. Okay. That's helpful. And so what do you mean you didn't own your own airplanes at your I guess what's the difference between like what you just said about Schweitzer and what you were doing?
I was on the side. Most of my career would have been as an employee of Schweitzer. Okay. I would have been managing their flight department or one of their pilots.
Yeah, I see. Okay. Now,
and you mentioned my company, Northwest Aircraft Management, that I founded a few years ago. And what we were doing there is we were offering all of these management services to a company like this engineering company that owned their own airplanes. We would offer them the management and the flight crew services, so they didn't have to have that aspect of it in house.
Right. So they would own the airplane, and then you would coordinate. So that way they wouldn't have to maybe have a full-time pilot that they pay, 12 months out of the year.
Yeah. And that's kind of the way the industry is moving. We're getting a lot more smaller corporations, and high net worth individuals that are just absolutely fed up with the airline system, and they've been successful. They can afford it, and they are beginning to see the advantages. And so rather than establish their own flight department and hire 2 or 3 guys like me on salary, they would turn to a company like mine, and we would offer them all of those services. We do everything from scheduling their flights to scheduling maintenance, taking care of maintenance on the aircraft, all of the databases that are required, everything is required to manage that airplane and to make it fly and make it ready to go, including providing crews to actually make the flight.
Right. That is interesting. So this makes me think of multiple questions here. One of the so this is me outside looking in, but also just my constant anti-big government instincts. One of the things that I think has plagued the airline industry so much are the regulations. It's a heavily regulated industry, and which is why the industry hasn't been as innovative as I think it could be.
Mm-hmm.
And then you add on top of this, like now you add the commercial airline industry into this mix where it's even more regulated than the private airline industry. And then you add in COVID 2020. I mean, my friend Dr. James White stopped flying. He drives everywhere now to all his stuff. So if he's speaking in Florida, he's driving.
Yeah.
And so now you have just people abandoning the commercial airline industry because the commercial airline industry, you aren't really their customer. I mean, you kind of are, but what they really do is the FAA is their customer, and big government is their customer, and TSA is their customer. They have to kowtow to all those organizations, and you're last in that customer list, which is why when the masking started, I mean, you remember walking through the airport and it said, federal law requires you to wear a mask kind of thing. And I every time it happened in the airport, I'm like, who makes law? Come on, everybody. Who makes the law? It's like, well, Congress does. Congress made no federal law that you had to wear a mask. And so okay, let me hone down this question here. Let's just talk in the private side of things. I think the yellow cab. This is, I think, a good kind of analogous scenario, sort of. The yellow cab industry. The reason why the yellow cab industry dominated taxi markets is because it's regulated. And you couldn't just start up your own taxi car company. You had to go through all this licensing, all that stuff, and then some. And then in some cities they wouldn't give more licenses because they looked at it like a tight market. And we have 100 cabs in this city because we have 500 people, whatever I'm making up. And so we can't give any more cab licenses out because we're going to be flooding the market. So you have this yellow cab industry, and in some cities is very regulated, more regulated than others. And then Uber came along, and Uber was just a ride sharing, is a totally different category that there was no regulations that had been created for. And really what Uber did, all they did was take a legacy industry and update it with technology. That's what it was. It was an app, and the app created a better user experience than the yellow cab experience. In connecting people. And so I have a hunch that in the next 20 years there's going to be something super innovative in the airline industry or aerospace industry, which I hope happens, that does something like that makes things more affordable, that gets away from commercial airline, that really shakes things up. And I guess, so start with me here. What's been the challenge in the aerospace industry, maybe just beyond regulation too, that has made it difficult to innovate in this space?
Well, there's, I'm going to try to answer that in 2 different ways. One is when we talk about regulation of the airline industry, I'm old enough to remember back in the days when it was much more highly regulated than it is now. And we went through what we call deregulation. And there was a huge proliferation of small regional airlines that came on and kind of shook up the industry. And that was viewed by a lot of people as being a good thing. A lot of that regulation has crept back in. It just, it's the nature of the government. They're going to continue to grab power wherever they can. And you're right, the FAA answers to Congress, but the administrator is appointed by the president, and there's they have regulative powers, and so they can make regulations that Congress never sees, and enforce them on on the airline industry and on you as a passenger. So there's that aspect, but there's also tremendous pressure in the in our society and in our culture for safety. We absolutely go nuts when airplanes fall out of the sky and people get killed.
Yeah.
So when we have those knee-jerk reactions, I'm not saying that that's not a bad thing. It's a horrible thing. It's a horrible thing when airplanes are not maintained well or whatever it is that caused that crash. But this puts a tremendous amount of pressure on the industry and on the FAA to increase regulation. The only thing our society knows today is if there's something wrong, if there's something bad, make a law or make a regulation to try to fix it. So that's why we keep dumping all of this stuff on. And from its very inception, the FAA has had two conflicting mandates. When it was first established, it was mandated to regulate the aviation industry in the United States and to promote. And in fact, I think in their charter, it actually flips those. I think it says to promote and regulate. And those are somewhat, those are not somewhat, they're very contradictory. And I think that because of these pressures I'm talking about from our culture, the regulation side of it has kind of taken dominance, has become the dominant aspect of it. So there's that going on. But you bring up a really intriguing question about and I'm going to call it I think you mentioned it to me on the phone, the Uberization of aircraft. Well, I think you're correct in your vision. You may be a little bit aggressive in your time frame. There are several companies that are spending billions and billions of dollars right now on that concept.
Wow.
They have new aircraft flying. They have technologies being developed. And a very good friend of mine, in fact, he was my chief engineer when I was manufacturing airplanes, served as the engineering vice president for one of those companies for a number of years. But this part of the problem is that it's not just technology that is holding us back in that. There are some dynamic factors that are going to have to be solved before we see it on a large scale. And one is when you just talk about Uber, one of the reasons that Uber was able to be successful is that they had a pool of individuals with cars, or they would at least help them get a car, and so they had a ready supply. And that's going to be the real problem with an Uber style air taxi, because you're going to have to. Well, let's just say if we're looking at it from an Uber standpoint, you're going to have safe vehicles and very highly trained individuals to fly them. It's not like the housewife takes off and does 2 hours of Uber. So the answer to that problem is going to be pilotless vehicles. And those are already being developed. And I think that's what's going to have to happen. And then again, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that we have some physics problems, and that's that when something goes wrong in an airplane, gravity takes over and it falls out of the sky, and it's
Yeah.
not anything. And so you, in order to make that a safe option for people, that we've got a lot to do. We've got a long
Yeah.
way. I think eventually it'll happen, but there's so much that has to be also developed within the infrastructure
Hmm.
to be able to know where all of those airplanes are in 3 dimension all the time.
Yeah. Do you think with the potential invention of, driverless cars, driverless airplanes, driverless, drones or whatever, that would be the way the market might proceed? Driverless drone airplane or something like that.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't need this. That would eliminate the staffing problem. You always going to have the gravity problem. I don't know how you eliminate the gravity problem. So safety's the engineering of that craft has to be premium. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just kind of thinking about aloud, trying to answer some of the objections that you brought up.
Yeah.
For that innovation.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. The technologies are going to first be realized in the driverless cars.
Yeah.
When we get to, we thought we're kind of moving along that pretty well, but then once they put some of them out on the road, they realize some of the pitfalls. So when you see driverless vehicles on the road, and the general public accepts that as a viable form of transportation, then I would trigger your 20-year. I'd say 20 years from then, we'll start seeing them lift up off the ground and fly.
Well, in some sense, I think the basically it's like an AI algorithm for driverless cars. That's basically what's driving it. And the algorithm on the ground is super complex because you have people walking crosswalks, you have animals crossing roads, you have street lights, you have turning lane lights while the other lights are red. You got this one green light, so there's just so many nuances and factors to consider in the driverless world. Now, in the air world, I actually think it's more simple. The algorithm's more simple.
Actually, I don't think so. I think it's exponentially more complex because you're now going from 2-dimensional movement to 3-dimensional, and you're adding in weather, which is probably the biggest danger that we have. You're adding in weather that is okay. So you take your stoplight and your turn signal. That's something that you can quantify and you can look at and you can put it into the algorithm.
Yeah.
The weather, you often can't put it into the algorithm at all unless you're getting real-time information from the vehicle who's right in the middle of the thunderstorm.
Yep.
So even if you're 15 miles away from the thunderstorm, you don't really know the dynamics that are going on within it. When you start throwing in the 3-dimensional aspect, other traffic that's out there that may or may not be reporting its position. We're just starting. We're in the very infancy of being able to track aircraft in real time. We call it the ADS-B system, but it's very rudimentary at this time, and there's a lot of people out there flying around who are not using it. They're supposed to, but you've got all of these things going on that I would make the argument to you that it's exponentially more complex than the algorithm that's going to be required for the driverless car. That's why I'm saying, when you see the driverless car and they pretty well got a handle on it, give it 20 years before we can.
Interesting. Okay, that's helpful. Now you do consulting. Do you consult? I'm still just learning about you here. Do you consult with, private businesses outside the airline industry, or are you most of your consulting focused just on the airline industry?
I've done both. I stumbled into a business a number of years ago that they hired me to run their flight department. And soon found out that the business itself was in dire condition financially. I was promoted to general manager because they liked what I did in the flight department. And then another 6 months after that, I wound up as president and CEO of the company. And we were successful in kind of stopping the bleeding and getting the company back to profitability. But because of some other industry factors and all, I made a recommendation to the board of directors that we not continue, because this was going to be just a fight. There were some structural issues within that business that were not solvable, and at least in the short run, without some massive capital infusion. So anyway, long story short, as a result of that experience, I was invited to come into some other businesses and consult with them on turning them around, companies that were troubled. Kind of how that happened was one of our biggest clients in this business that was failing was one of the large regional banks here in the Northwest.
Okay.
They owned airplanes, and so we were taking care of those. So the guy that I worked with, the vice president of the bank that I worked with, started introducing me to their special assets group, and also to the bankruptcy court to be put into a company either as a receiver or as a crisis manager. So I did that for a number of years, and that led to kind of a broad experience in consulting. And even though I didn't continue that as my main occupation, I don't consider myself to be primarily a consultant now. I still do it. And there's still people who call me and they'll say, man, we're just really, usually what they say is that they're in a cash flow crunch. And when they come to you and tell you that they're in a cash flow crunch, you know immediately that there's other things really going on. And you got to get to the root of it. And so, I guess I've, the Lord's blessed me with an intuition for those kinds of things. I seem to have a knack for being able to read financial, reports and things like that. So yeah, I do it, both for, the aviation industry and also, guys that are in manufacturing. I've owned a fairly substantial manufacturing company, at one time, and actually two of them, two businesses that were very successful in the manufacturing sector. So I enjoy that. Always liked flying though too.
Yeah. So I'm really interested about like the crisis management, turning a business around. When you come into a situation and the business is not doing well, tanking, failing, whatever, what are the major identifying factors that are causing that failure? Is there a consistency across businesses that you're seeing?
Yeah. I would, and there's obviously, I'm going to paint with a very broad brush here, but the most common thing that we would see is a company that doesn't have a handle on their costs. They really don't know what their cost of goods sold are. The other thing is that they're quite frequently, particularly in smaller businesses, owner, managed businesses, family businesses. There are decisions that are being made emotionally, and from that's the way Dad did it, kind of a thing. If it's a second generation business, and so there are procedures and policies that they're pursuing, and they don't even know what the real ramifications of those are. And we often see senior management of companies like that, owners of smaller businesses, that they have tremendous talent at producing a gadget or a widget. Maybe they've even invented this themselves, and it's a great product. But they may not have had, and I say may not, they almost always don't have good accounting abilities or instincts, and so they've maybe hired the local bookkeeping company to take you set QuickBooks for them or something like that, but they don't know how to read their own stuff. And so one of the first things that we would do is get into the business and take control of the business. And by that, I mean, usually you wind up firing almost everybody that's in the top level of business. Because it's very, very difficult for people to change the way they've been doing things for a long time. And then begin to evaluate, that process starts with interviewing, and your gold mine is in the middle management down. That's where you get your best information. The other thing that's a very common misconception, I hear this almost everywhere, is that management thinks that they can sell their way out of trouble.
Right.
They can just increase revenue. And that's probably the worst thing that could possibly happen to them.
Wow.
They increase revenue and they don't have the infrastructure, they don't have the capital base, they don't have things set up in a way that it can can sustain additional profit, or not profits, but additional revenues. And so it just exacerbates the problem and increases their spiral. So, those are the things we look at. First thing is to get control of the business, get control of the people, find out what's really happening, what's really going on, and then finding out exactly what your cost of goods sold are. And it varies widely and by industry. You know that. You look at one industry, and if you're running a gas station, you're making pennies on a gallon. If you're making some kind of esoteric gadget, you may have huge profits. So knowing the business, getting that acquainted, and then making really hard decisions that often an owner who this is his idea and he's been the founder, they don't want to make.
Yep. What are some of those hard decisions that you've had to make in this crisis turnaround?
Probably the hardest decision is to let go friends, to have to fire friends that that they just really are not going to survive with this business and be a part of its future. They've been part of the problem, but they're also either family members or friends. The second, and probably maybe this is even harder, is the decision to either close or to sell the business. One of the largest companies that I was referred into, and this was actually we were appointed by a bank and also later by bankruptcy court to manage this business. It was a second generation, very large Northwest. If I mentioned the name, you'd know exactly who I'm talking about. Second generation manufacturing company of wood products, and ultimately we had to make the decision to sell that to another large one of their competitors, and that was an almost impossible bitter pill for these guys because these were the enemy. The people that they sold it to were guys that for generation had been the competition and been who they've been selling against. But it was for the best interest, and it got the family out with a family legacy intact, even though it wasn't their grandpa's old company.
Right. Wow. It's hard. I mean, it really is hard to be a generational business.
Yes.
Now there are some very successful stories out there of generational businesses. But for a lot of the factors that you've stated and kind of critiqued and everything, but how have you been able to save some of these businesses and put them on a new and better course of profitability?
Absolutely, yes. And it's interesting because usually when we're the most successful is when ownership are young guys and and when I say young, I'm talking about guys 40 and younger, who they, have seen the vision that their ancestors had, but also are willing to innovate and are willing to make changes. They're not so emotionally attached. And as I mean, I've been doing this for almost 60 years. So I've been observing these things, and there's been a huge culture change. I think young men today, in general, that are in business and small businesses, are less constrained by tradition than they were when I first started doing this.
Yeah, yeah. What do you? So you mentioned earlier that. Say that again.
I said that's a good thing and a bad thing both.
Yeah. Yeah, right. What do you? So you said to me earlier that you've been trying to retire and you can't. So what's going on? What keep bringing you into back into the back onto the field?
Well, I don't know what I would do. Retirement really is that's an invention of our Western culture within the last 100 years. Before that we didn't know anything about it, and my dad never retired, and so I won't either. When I say retire, all it means is I'm going to transition to doing something different. And so when I got done with Northwest Aircraft Management, I really was hoping to transition into one of my passions that we haven't even talked about, and we don't have time today, is education. I was blessed with a mom that still believed that there was a value in Latin grammar, and so she taught us that. And so I've always had a real passion for classical schools, and so I was expecting to transition. In fact, I'm a member of the Association of Classical Christian Schools, and was in the kind of beginning to lay the groundwork to establish a new school here in this area. And then one of my largest clients, and a guy that I'd been with for a number of years, I respected tremendously, asked me if I would help him move his flight department. He was moving the headquarters of his company from here in the Portland area to Dallas, Fort Worth area. And so I agreed to a couple of years to help him get his airplane moved down there and to get the flight department established, because I figured that, I could do some of this other stuff on the, as I was going along. So that's kind of where I am right now. I'm dividing my time between Portland and Dallas, Dallas area, and dividing also my efforts between taking care of his airplanes and kind of planning for the future, seeing what's going to happen as I transition away from him.
Yeah. So are you actually trying to start a Christian classical school? Is it in the Battleground area or the Portland area?
Battleground area. Yeah.
Wow. And so where's that process at?
Well, it's certainly taken a little bit of a back seat right now. And you're probably familiar with what we call here the Battleground Project.
Yep.
And there's actually a podcast that they do. So it's a part of that broader impetus to establish the kingdom in this location. And so that's kind of how I see it fit. My vision is, knowing my age, I'm probably not going to be able to to see the full fruition of all these things, but I want to be an instigator, and I want to be a catalyst to move these things forward. I have a passion not only for the classical school portion, which I think is absolutely essential if we're going to have any semblance of coherent adults in the near future.
Yeah.
But also, we're seeing, and I'm sure you see the same thing up there in Moscow, but we're seeing just a huge influx of young families who are coming in. And one of my passions is the education of these guys. I was fortunate enough to be selected as one of the original Colson Fellows. We called ourselves the Centurions back then. Chuck called it Centurions because he only invited 100 people per year into the program. The program was nothing at all like what it is today. It was, I would say, at least 3 to 4 times more rigorous.
Yeah.
the things that we went through. But it was a program that I've always wanted to see in some ways replicated or mimicked, at least on a local level, in churches with problems like we've got. These are wonderful problems, but many of the people that God is bringing to us are, they don't have Reformed backgrounds. They don't have an understanding. They come from a broad evangelical background, or
Yeah.
sometimes, no background at all in spiritual things. So, that's part of my passion.
Wow. One of the things I appreciate, you made comments about like retiring and how it's just a modern construct, and 100% agree. And one of the sad tragedies of the retirement culture is that the passing down of work ethic, wisdom, and gets cut off in its prime. So someone retires from their business when they're 65. Well, one of the damaging things that's happening there is that God has sanctified you for 65 years. You've had 65 years of failures and successes. You've had 65 years and then you go retire. And instead, it's like you're actually, in some shape or form, actually probably in your prime and having impact on your business and the work that God has put before you. And then you actually step away during your prime. Right. So you have, amassed 65 years of knowledge. I don't know how old you are, but you've amassed, all this knowledge, all this wisdom, all this success and failure, and you've gone through a major amount of experiences. And then in addition to that, like the next generations, should be looking to be tutored and discipled. That's how God built the world. That's just how God built structure, right? And then that person disappears in retirement, and that's so it's a shame that older men like you you aren't doing this, but it's a shame that they retire because they're actually doing a disservice to the next generations that are coming up from behind them.
Absolutely. I could not agree with you more, Gabe. It's a real tragedy, and it's been one of the enemy's greatest successes to change this whole concept of honoring the elders of a society and of a community. Now we just dismiss the elders. We got the okay boomer. There's no. And of course, it's easy for me to say because I am one now. But I've been able to see this my entire life, and my mentors were always men who were in their 50s, 60s, and 70s, men with knowledge and wisdom that I couldn't duplicate without years of my own failures and successes, and they steered me and they helped me, invaluable. So I think you're absolutely correct, and it was never God's plan for guys to check out. And now we don't even want to wait till 65. We want to take early retirement. We want to take early retirement, buy a place down and where it's nice and warm, and play golf all day. I know a guy who's proud of the fact that he averages somewhere between 6 and 8 rounds of 18 holes every week. Wow. I'm reminded of several years ago. John Piper's saying about don't waste your retirement. That whole concept. Yeah. He was dead right on.
Yeah. What do you? Okay, I know we got to go here, but and this question is I'm definitely popping this question on you. But you think back in your career, what would you had done differently?
Oh man. Boy, that's a tough one. I would say, and you just mentioned something else that I think fits right into the answer. And you said something about my successes and my failures, and we haven't talked about my failures. And I can guarantee you, anybody who's been in business and has lived as long as I have, there's some huge failures out there. And I've had some business failures, and I would say that the answer to your question is being able to um, see and embrace the providence of God in failure. One thing that God has given me an insight into, and I say this to young men, and they look at me like I'm crazy, but Gabe, I have been incredibly blessed in my life. But my greatest blessings have been my losses.
Amen.
And those have been business losses and personal losses.
Yeah.
And to be able to embrace the providence of God through those things would have been the main thing I would have changed. Because
Beautiful.
man, I tried to batter down some closed doors.
Yeah, right.
And as I've gotten older and older, I've been able to see more clearly God's providence and His care for His people and His care for me.
Yeah.
And my biggest problem is that I always trusted that God would take care of me. I just didn't think He'd take care of me the way I wanted to be taken care of.
Right. Yep.
So to reconcile those things would be the biggest change I would strive for.
Yeah, I'm 45, and you made me think of kind of a similar thinking about what I do differently. I would say, for one, embrace each job that God has given you, and learn what you need to learn from it.
Yeah,
take what you need to take from it. Give your best in each position that God's given you, and learn how to be your best in that position. A lot of when you're growing up and you're young and you're just mowing yards for your neighbors and making $25 a yard or whatever, I remember I worked at this warehouse for a summer, and we walked probably 13 miles a day at that warehouse, just walking from one end to the next, fetching products and putting it on the 18-wheeler truck. This is a very mundane job, but I'm as I think back on when I was just a sales rep and I ended up being vice president of business development at one of my companies that I worked for. But even just as a sales rep, like you think like this is you don't trust in God for the meaning He's given you at this level in your career. Don't constantly think, I need to climb, I need to go, I need to, it's like, let God bless the increase, but do your best where God has you. And part of it is like, it's like the business world is full of them, especially between men. It's like envy and pride really dance well together, because envy, you're constantly, why don't I have this guy's job? Why, and then pride is like, oh, I got to be the best in the room. But it's for your own glory, not for, you should be the best in the room. Absolutely, you should be striving to be the best in the room, but you mix that with pride and envy in the business culture, and you lose your love for what God has given you when those creep in.
Yep, you're absolutely right. And we could spend the rest of the day, and I could tell you story after story, illustrating what you just described.
Yeah,
both for my own life and also people that I've known well. So that's it. God, we make our plans, but God directs our steps. That's right. To really internalize that's what I'm talking about, and what you're talking about. And one of the most important books I ever read was probably been 30 years ago. Somebody gave it to me. It's an old Puritan book called The Crook in the Lot by Thomas Boston.
Yeah,
and it talks about, and what he's talking about there is the crook and the lot of life that we have. There's we got this. We think we have this lot of life, and God throws crooks into it.
Yeah,
and those old Puritan guys. Now there's some wisdom.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, thank you so much. Is there any way people can follow you on social media, or you do much there? How can people reach out to you?
I do a little bit on Twitter once in a while, but no, I've kind of gotten away from social media. I canceled my Facebook account, got off of there. It just wasn't profitable. It didn't serve what I felt God was calling me to do.
Yeah. Amen. Okay. Well, you guys can reach out to me if you want to get connected with Richard. I'll screen everything. I'll screen everything. Richard, thank you so much for coming on Business Makers. Really appreciate the conversation. I feel like we should have started off with the last 20 minutes of what we just talked about, because I'd love to integrate your stories and your personal life into what we were discussing. So thank you for coming on, Richard, man. Lord bless you.
Enjoy it. And thank you for what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Make sure you share the show, share Business Makers and what we're doing. And, of course, we would love to see you at our Fight Laugh Feast conference, including the Pre-Business Makers conference in Fort Worth, Texas, October 31st through November 2nd. So thank you for tuning in. Download our app, become a club member, and we'll see you next week.
When I grow up, I want to work for a woke company, like super woke.
When I grow up,
I want to be hired based on what I look like,
I want to be judged
by my political beliefs.
I want to be a conformist.
When I grow up, I want to be offended
by my coworkers and walk around the office on eggshells. When I grow up, I want to weaponize my pronouns. What are pronouns?
It's time to grow up and get back to work. Introducing the #1 woke-free job board, redballoon.work.
Apart. And as it crumbles, a void is opening, a void that we intend to fill. The big legacy news networks currently average just 1.2 million viewers a weeknight, and those numbers are only going to get lower. Legacy media is dying, and the younger generation has moved on. Legacy media panders. Legacy media lies. Legacy media does not know what the truth is, and they don't care about it. Legacy media is a dumpster fire. This is why we, you, in our wild imagination, have started the Fight Laugh Feast Network. Our goal is to take down the legacy media giant of the last 50 years with our 5 stones. We started in 2016 with our flagship show, Cross Politics. Since those small beginnings, we now air on DirecTV. Our broader podcast network now gets over 4 million downloads a year. And our Fight Laugh Feast Pub, which includes TV shows like This America, The Rowdy Christian's Guide, Pastors in Politics, and As the Lord Pleases, with your support, many more to come. Our goal is to become the flagship new media 2.0 network over the next years and take over nightly news, sports, sitcoms, honey shows, and more, all conveniently stored for you in our Fight Laugh Feast Pub. We're already reaching the next generation through our podcast shows on YouTube, X, and our pub, while also tapping into legacy media audiences by airing shows on TV, DirecTV, and Xfinity. We have made a lot of progress with some duct tape and a good bit of intuition and a lot of sweat. And now we need your support more than ever. The TV networks have had such a negative impact on our households, and we're trying, by the grace of God, to put a stop to that. We have the opportunity. We just need the army. Now more than ever, we need you to join our pub to help us reach our goal of 1 million pub supporters in the next 5 years. There's no way around it. Competing with Fox and the Alphabet networks without money is virtually impossible. It's cheap for you to join. And when you do, you're combining your small monthly support with a growing army of like-minded Christians. We have thousands, we need millions. So if you want more of the Alphabet network's misinformation and lies, don't join. But if you want to give us a mere 5 stones, then please join the pub, and together we will take a swing at the head of big media, all the while fighting, laughing, and feasting to the glory of God.